right, I'm David Berkowitz back with another edition of AI Insiders from AI Marketers Guild, part of Marketecture Media's family here. And this week, we've got a special guest I've wanted to have on for a while and trying to get the right time. I'm convinced this is the right week to have you, Tiffany Holland. So, an amazing founder, entrepreneur, marketer, history, brand side, Nordstrom and T-Mobile, and going over to the media side, agency side, uh, uh, just uh, uh, getting some amazing work going in terms of just using AI to tap into culture and build brands even better. So I'm excited to hear more about what you're up to and what you're thinking about and doing these days. Tiffany, welcome to the community.
Yeah, thank you. I've been participating on the Slack side, but this is the first time coming to a meeting and presenting at a meeting. So
Well,
this is
we're
exciting.
very glad to have you. So.
So hi, nice to meet all of you. I am Tiffany Holland, not NCL Lake Washington chapter. This is one of, again, many things from parenting side that I'm involved with, but I also am founder and head of marketing strategy at an agency called Consiglieri. And we have built a AI tool called Clamor, which I will talk a little bit about. But really the topic is broader than that. It's more about how can AI-powered cultural intelligence, and kind of talking about what this term means, unlocks competitive advantage. So just a bit about me. David gave a great overview. I think kind of what's important about my background is I started on the tech side of things. So was building kind of the web 1.0 is where I started, and didn't really realize I was going to be on this journey of being tech evangelist for brands and companies and ambassadors for using technology and technology for good, I will say, trying to. And again, started on the agency side, was building web applications, all different various industries, then moved over to a position at Nordstrom. And then that took me on a journey into marketing. And that journey, because I had had all this digital expertise, led me into being hey, why don't you be the one that figures out how we transition more from catalog into investments into digital and kind of this digital transformation projects. And then that led me to T-Mobile, where it was doing very similar things. Met some of my co-founders there. We had all had kind of similar agency brand background and experiencing some of the similar problems. And so we started to branch off and create Consiglieri. But was trying to think about the through line in all these things, change agent being a big thing, architecting things as opposed to just managing and running things. Didn't really think about that being distinct or different, but now as, kind of do some of these things, I start to think about, wow, that was a different path than maybe others have been on. Outside of that, I feel like I'm doing a lot of those things inside, spend a lot of time in community board positions, sports chaperones. I have 2 hounds that hopefully you won't hear from during this presentation, but they are here as well. And love tennis, love watching and love playing. So I talked a little bit about why we started Consiglieri. It seems like as the technology grows, that organizations grow along with it. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. I think we all have experiences where you sort of grow through your career and you may understand how technology works or how to get things done or how to do certain things, but there's a lot of marketers that aren't necessarily operators or haven't had to go horizontally across organizations or think about new ways of doing things. It's just like, if you do it well, you get it done. And so we started Consiglieri with the hope that we could help marketers embrace not just the current technology, but even the technologies that have come about that are still very powerful, that haven't yet fully been adopted, and making things better. So this is what we've been doing, and you can see some of the clients that we work for. And so as marketers, I assume all of you are kind of familiar with the same story. There's, some new business initiative that needs a marketing campaign, and the marketing strategist gets, maybe a couple days to build a brief around this. which is at the heart of it is supposed to be a consumer truth. But in reality, the strategist has very little information about the consumer truths. They might have some old data, some past, campaigns that they've run, a research panel that's probably getting a little stale, some media results that maybe tell you like, here's what happened, but really not why. You've got social teams that have a bunch of information and all of this like conversations that are happening, but they're kind of primarily focused on channel health metrics and kind of have their heads down just trying to keep up with that. And so consequently, what happens is you kick things off and you've got something that is like fairly informed, but not really informed or inspiring brief. I feel like that has been the case when I started my career, and it's my case today when I'm working with clients. And like that problem has been a constant problem we've all dealt with, but is like just not something that anybody really feels like they ever really need to deal with. And it sort of boggles us on a daily basis. So when we set out to build this AI tool, it really wasn't about like, hey, we really need the world needs another AI tool, or the world even needs any more software. It was, how could we really solve this business problem of just empowering marketers to be able to do their jobs and think deeper and really feel like they're taking informed action that they really haven't had access to before. So it was like, we know that all the bits and pieces exist, but how do we put this all together so that it can be actionable? So our viewpoint, and this might be controversial, it might be a no-brainer, I don't know, depending on who we talk to, we get different results. But how could we use AI to tap into all of the social platforms that brands are using, not just one, but like look across all of it, look across organic, look across paid, look across all these conversations and find out what customers are feeling, what they're saying, what they're responding to, and use AI and the LLMs to help aggregate that and be predictive about what things, what's working well, what should we be doing differently, not from a generalized LLM standpoint. There is some proprietary stuff in here as well, but like what they're doing, is it working, is it not, and getting down to kind of a nuanced level. So one of the issues is like, well, okay, there's a ton of social listening tools, like can't you use one of those, which would be ideal, except for the sprinklers, the Sprout Wash, all of these different tools. They are not built to do that. They are not built to think horizontal. They are not built to solve strategist problems. They're built to aggregate data and report on channel health and visualize and do word clouds and some of these things, which are helpful to people who are running social channels, but not helpful to people who are trying to solve business problems. And so we're like, this really doesn't feel like it can be an add-on to something that already exists. It feels like it has to be a net new thing. And so how we're defining cultural intelligence is like taking a look at all of this data and not just looking at the KPIs of social, but of engagement, sentiment, reach, but like the why behind it. Like, oh, there's engagement happening and there's tone shifts happening. And how is that engagement changing with those tone shifts? There's language patterns happening within the sentiment. What is that telling us? Is there friction between, we see this a lot, like this campaign is running great, but people are still pissed off that your subscription model is too expensive. And so no matter what you do here, they're constantly continuing to bring up this other problem here. So you're going to need to walk across the aisle and talk to your friends over in product or in sales and figure out how to adjust this. But this is not how organizations work. And so, again, the tools aren't set to do this. But if you could tap into these things, this could unlock a lot of really rich insights that would drive not only briefs, but how you go to market, how you design products, even just getting people talking inside your organization, being less elbows out and elbows in, has a ton of value. And so we're like, let's try this. We need to build this. And so we did. We built this tool. It's called Clamor. And again, it is, using the LLMs. So we tried to use as much technology that already exists, but then there is this proprietary layer that we call Senti, which is just our name that we came up for it, that is really supposed to be the agent that is thinking like a strategist, thinking like a creative, and running all of this data through that lens of what would these folks inside the organizations want to know about what's going on within these conversations that are happening. And so this just gives you a little preview of what it is. But essentially, again, this is supposed to go kind of through the full cycle. So before the brief, when you have questions like cultural tensions, tone shift, things that you feel like probably need to change, but you're not really sure how, you can go in and kind of see what's going on and see what consumer truths are happening in there that you might be able to address. If you have a campaign, you might be able to say, hey, I have this idea, and predictively ask Clamor, would this resonate? Based on what we're seeing, would this resonate? And start to interact and interact with the data, which we think is the most important. And then when you go to market, obviously, some people like it, some people don't. It's performing well in some channels and not others. You can look across and find those nuances and make those, be that personalization layer that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. And then there is the what did we learn? What should we do next? It's giving you these provocations and recommendations, not to do your job, but just to help you do your job better. So we'll go through an example here. We have one of our beta partners, Manscaped, such a fun brand. This is such a fun brand for a 9 a.m. Wednesday conversation, but we'll show you how they used it. So this is a very professional shot we use here. Not sure if you're aware of this brand. They like to say they're the number one brand in men's below the belt grooming. So all the products you need for those sort of things. I say this because this is their brand. They embrace locker room humor. They're irreverent. They've used this tone to just kind of take something that's a category that's taboo and make it more accessible and interesting and fun. And so it's really worked for them. Again, a lot of ball joke humor, it works for their audience. But then they start to expand into other products, skincare, beard care, hair care. So their brand is evolving. There's internal debates about whether they should stick with the same positioning and tone or whether they should start to evolve. And so they're having these debates about it. So again, they're not having an awareness problem. They're having a positioning kind of crisis internally. And so the social team has come up with this new creative campaign that they think is going to be really successful. So it still has the humor piece, but it's sort of evolving it. And again, they're fighting about it internally. And I use that word lightly, but they're having discourse about it internally. And so we partnered with them, and they ran this through our Clamor tool and said, hey, based on what you're seeing in our social channels, how is this going to land? What's going to work about it? What doesn't? And so they were able to sort of get some sort of predictive validation that this is going to work, that they could speak to help sell it in, to make sure that they could even go to market with this. So this campaign became very viral for them, and performed better than even what they expected. But of course, you've got multiple different audiences in here now having different reactions, different conversations. And so they were able to use their regular tools to keep responding and keep posting and doing community management. But from an executive level and across, from the creative teams who have to keep, this is not just a one and done thing. It's a thing that keeps evolving. They were able to do some monitoring, have, again, those real-time conversations, and then evolve kind of the tone of also how they were responding from a community management perspective, but also the additional creative that they came up with that sort of took with the long tail of this thing that they, previous to this, I think it was a little bit more of a launch and leave situation. And so they're starting to evolve not just their tone, but their ways of working and their ways of responding to consumers. So I think that part of it is the creative, but part of it is just they're learning a new function. They're learning a new way of working, of being a little bit more iterative, which is fantastic. And so the end result is kind of this better discovery, feeling more validated in what they're doing, allowed them to be more involved, and creating, better decisions, better outcomes. So this one performed 9 times higher in engagement and drove 95% positive sentiment. That again was their idea, but just having that validation and trust and buy-in internally allowed them to just move faster and kind of evolve faster than they would have otherwise. So that's kind of this idea. Again, AI can be used for lots of things, and I think this conversation about the replacing marketers is ridiculous. But I really think that even there's lots of ways to define cultural intelligence, but this is just one mechanism for which I believe that this can really start to unlock again, if you can talk about coming in and transforming everything and making everything different. But honestly, if we felt like if you could just make the brief better, if you could just get people talking and communicating and working off of centralized data, that the downstream effect of that will just take care of itself. And you won't have to be, coming in and being this top-down change agent, but really this sort of bottoms-up empowerment that will lead to just sort of better internal working, but also better consumer experiences that ultimately lead to competitive advantage. So again, we believe there's multiple right answers that kind of speak to this. So I'd love to just sort of open this up to discussion and use this as thought provocation and answer any questions that you all might have.
I mean, this is terrific, and it's fun seeing all this for sure. I'm most curious what's really different with your process and how you go and come up with work and work with your clients now that you have tools like Senti in your corner. And what's the biggest change from how it was like pre-Senti, you know?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I feel like, I think part of why we did this is that, you say a lot of words as consultants and, kind of the show and tell this now provides of like, we're saying that you need to change your operating model. We're saying we need to sort of break down these silos that the technology has created. But like, let me show you an example of this. You've got your social team. They've got all this information. Instead of shoving them over to the side, let's pull them into the conversation and pull them into the center. And how do we use the social data as proxy for other things? How do we engage with that? How do we feel like we're more empowered? And so I felt like before this, we could say those things and people would sort of nod along and say, okay, yeah, that's an interesting, but like they sort of go back to their day-to-day work and it doesn't really become actionable. I think when they can see their own data and start to see the kinds of things that are the information that's coming back and recommendations and provocations, they're like, oh, it turns the light on and it starts to create more questions and more curiosity than it did before, when it was just sort of a theoretical thing that you could do, but being able to show them exactly what people are saying. We've had clients that have said, they've had, again, sometimes it's just these internal debates of like, oh, someone's seeing, we all see different things on our social channels and it creates all these debates. And then it's like, well, it's not working because I'm seeing, somebody, blowing up this post and they're mad. And somebody else is like, I don't see that at all. I see that everything is great. And so you can start to cut across all of that and say, okay, there's been 1,000 comments. 85% are positive, and the things that are negative are really a product issue versus a marketing issue versus a service issue. Like you can sort of just figure out where the crux of it is and start to have better conversations about it.
I just had a question about breadth of how it works. So we do a lot of listening and escalation in HIPAA compliant environments, sometimes across like LinkedIn, Meta, but oftentimes across closed communities like membership-oriented doctor patient portal sites. What's the breadth of how it can be pointed and how it works that way?
Yeah. Technically, we could set it up to look at all sorts of things. Right now, it's set up to look at public data. So things across Facebook, anything that's public, Facebook, Meta, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, I'm probably forgetting some, but anyway, these are really, what consumers are saying in public. We've talked about it's on the roadmap to add in things like discourse and Reddit, which I like to say are like the things that people are saying behind your back. Like everything that's public is like, this is what they're saying to your face, and you may be listening or you may be not, and you may be responding. But like, what are the conversations that they're having in closed rooms and small, behind closed doors? That could be loaded in here. It's just not something that we've made a priority yet.
Okay. And so the thought is that it would work similar to how like a Sprout or Meltwater works, but with more nimbleness of the questions that you can ask to inform a creative brief.
Yeah, I mean, it can inform sort of go-to-market strategy. It has the ability to go in and be, I would say, reactive of like looking at all the conversations that are happening and pulling broader themes. Hopefully, that starts to engage some ideas of things that you could be doing. You can also go in and ask it directly, like you would any LLM, where you just ask Clamor, you just have provocations, and be as broad as you want with them. I think again, the sprinklers and the Sprout, they're staying very specific to just channel health metrics and like how are things doing within a particular channel, but they don't go across channel and they don't go across paid and organic and kind of pulling in all of the conversations and making sense of them. I think they also don't really get into it's a bit more dashboardy and transactional. It's less interactive and engaging with that. They might get there at some point, but I don't know that their clients are asking for those things.
It's very painful and excruciating to get it to listen to something appropriate.
That is like, it was not our goal to take on these tools. It was like, this is an unmet need that I don't think is a priority of theirs, and so we're going to do it. But in the discussions, we've been hearing a lot about how the social teams are frustrated with the tools that they have. I feel like anytime I've gone to engage a social, person and a strategist on a team and ask kind of a basic business question, they're like, I don't know. I don't have the tool. I can tell you, what the dashboards tell me, and then we can do some sort of like decoder ring translation discussion, but not really a, real time. Okay, let's just ask and have it pull up an answer that, again, is not a hard quantitative metric, but a signal to be able to tell you, answer just basic business questions. People who stop by your desk day to day.
And so on a policy basis, like internally, do you have some lines where you're like, use AI for this and not that?
I mean, I think there's the consulting side of what we do. And so that's, kind of helping with AI readiness. And like, ultimately that is less about the tech and more about the like, how do you operate and how broken is that process and how frustrated are people with that? Because it's hard to implement, enable like this. We joke about this whole enablement thing. It's like people are buying AI and they're buying this Lamborghini and parking it in front of their house because they've got, they're not set up to use this type of, technology. And so we have a hard time selling like operational efficiency and operating model as a concept, but I mean, for better or for worse, AI is the topic du jour. So we use that as the mechanism to start the conversation. We might then do consulting on, you've had 5 reorgs and you have all these different teams and nobody knows what they're doing and what their remit is and how it's different from other. Like we do have to clean up that a little bit so that we can figure out what agents should be doing that should be automated and take that off of the human's plate. But what can we also then empower? It's less about taking away, but also about how do we enable people that are here to do their jobs better. And access to information seems to be just an ongoing conversation. And again, social teams have their own data, media teams have their own data, creative teams have no data, strategists have no data, but they're the start of the thing with the brief that informs everything. And so the whole thing is fundamentally broken, but also easily fixable if it's a priority.
Other questions from the community? Curious where
Yeah,
everyone's. Please, Sally.
this is great. And so my key question it's kind of a how does it work question and a prompt question. So did you go into Clamor and name the client's name, Manscaped, or did you say, what's the sentiment about men's skincare these days? I'm just kind of curious how you set it up to get the insights, how you
Yeah.
talk the LLM.
Yeah. So we have two different ways that you can get to insights. One is, we have tools that are set up in the system that go in and scrape data so you can see what's happening on the social. It's not as rich of information, but without having your social channels connected, we can see kind of a certain layer of information. Manscaped went in and connected all their social channels. So now we can go directly into their feeds and see, get just richer data about sort of the conversations that are going on. And so then they were in the tool, and again, just sort of seeing how it worked. It was pulling out some trends about like, yeah, there are audiences that just absolutely love the humor that, and again, it was far worse than what you just saw. And, loved it. But then they were starting to notice audience segments that were less fond of it and not, and responding. So, taking the time to respond so in social. And so it was, and, starting to then dig into, okay, what percentage of the engagement is, really, positive sentiment versus neutral to negative. And they were starting to see, it wasn't a huge group, but it was starting to uptick. And so that was kind of flag number one. And then once they could kind of see that, okay, they could trust that the data, like, oh, okay, yes, these are, in a lot of ways, it wasn't necessarily pulling back a, oh my God, I had no idea. It was sort of the like, I knew it, like I knew it, but I just didn't have the validation tool to validate the thing that, I was feeling or the things that I was seeing on a more sporadic basis. And so just having something sort of aggregated in a tool allowed them to kind of start this dialogue with the creative leads and the other teams about, hey, I think we need to do something different. They came up with this idea about, face pics and like, how funny that would be. And ran that through the Ask Clamor. Like, what if we did something along the lines of this? So explained the brief, and based on the information, it came back and said, there were certain things like, yes, these sort of things would work. You might hear suggestions of how you might adjust these other things or include, and, made recommendations of things that you might consider and include. Again, they didn't take all of those recommendations, but again, it was helping them, build confidence in the thing that they were building. And so then, so they don't use it word for word, but again, it's just kind of that just, checks and balances, validation, having that data to help inform. And then they ran it. And then, within an hour or two, they could start to see how sentiment was changing. Again, they can interact with the data and ask those same questions of like, hey, what's working, what's not? How do I, what recommendations do you have? So it was suggesting formats that they might consider that have been successful, that they might, and so, lots of different elements. And so again, it's not a, you must go do this. It was just more food for thought, which then creates more ideation. So again, it's just sort of fueling the curiosity wheel and providing that validation that they need to have good discourse with their colleagues.
Cool. So kind of the sentiment analysis that we've talked about for a number of years, plus kind of seeing it across all the channels and then using the new kind of LLM prompt kind of sounds like it.
Yeah, it's kind of merging all those things
Trying
together.
to simplify it, but I would just, but that's kind of how it, okay, cool. I like that.
I hate to say, like, I think this is how I always thought the social listening tools already worked, and then realized they didn't work this way just because, again, they were built to do something different. And I'm like, but this is how I need it to work to do the jobs I've had in the past or that social teams, are doing now. So we've been doing some beta testing with Manscaped and Google and a few others along the way, and working with their teams of sort of what do you need, what would you like to see, and build it in a workspace model so it's not a licensed tool. So it's kind of unlimited seats. So you can invite your agencies in, you can invite your brand strategist in, you can invite your creative lead in, and kind of have, you're all working off of a central source of information to be able to do each of your specific tasks, but feel like you can all kind of see it from the same thing. Sprinkler and Sprout also allow you to do publishing. This does not. So it is kind of that safe space where you can interact with the data without messing anything up. It's like, again, those other tools are on a licensed basis, so they're probably not going to invite other teams in. And yeah, you can go in and do damage if you start publishing. So they're like, no, we're not going to let other teams in to do this.
Well, I could see this. So I come out of journalism and content and PR and all those things. So I could see this as a way to find white space for a brand, like story equals. And I'm also wondering if you've thought of this for crisis communications, because I'm actually reading a book right now on crisis, and there's just so many things to do for a corporation these days. I mean, geopolitics and all the things, there's just so many things that could become a crisis for a company. I was just wondering if you had ever thought of that application, or do you think it could work for that? Like if I don't know, some whatever, just can't think of a great example right now, but tariffs. Okay, tariffs. Could a company go in and say, hey, are you seeing any, gurgling over here or anything over here that our shareholders might be interested in? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it does that specifically, but there is kind of at the beginning of it, there is a small dashboard element, which we kind of call the ticker tape, which is like, okay, we're going to come in here and we're going to start looking at social data. What is the state of social at the moment? Like, is it on fire? Like, is there a crisis going on? Or is it like, DEFCON 5, everything's fine and like it's just business as usual and we're all selling, trimmers and beard trimmers and whatever else. And so, but yes, I mean, I think the thought is this would be one tool that would help connect PR, social marketing, executives can go in here and just kind of figure out, okay, I talked to each of my different business units. They're all telling me, everything is great, but I can come in here and, kind of get this cross section of things that are going on and have a sense of, kind of the equivalent of, going to the call center and listening to calls and, going in store and see what's going on. Like this sort of gives a view that they didn't have. But yeah, to start those conversations. So you wouldn't necessarily handle the crisis through this tool,
Right.
but it would sort of give you the sense of like, hey, much like a sales dashboard or anything else, like what is going on? Are things up, down, good, bad, otherwise? Okay, great. Now, given that information, I might start to dive into this week's data, or I might want to look at 6 months worth of data or 3 years worth of, what is the trend in the past versus what's the trend today, and where are those differences happening, and what do we think is causing those differences? So we can go in real time and kind of start to do that type of analysis.
Yeah, I was just looking at your website. I love the way that you've built it. What have you used? What's the platform you've used to build the website? I'm curious about that.
Oh, the website. That's a good question. Jen Mack is on this call. Jen, answer that question.
I don't know if I remember the exact website platform, but I can get that answer.
Is it like a vibe coding website?
Yeah, our designer who is designing the application, she also, used Figma and then another tool to help turn that Figma into the website.
Okay, all right, thanks.
But yeah, we can find that and share that.
Not trying to get Karan another freelance assignment or anything, but I was just wondering, because he is a coder and a developer, would this system be able to add like an alert system? Like if something was happening to your brand on Reddit, or something, and you just your humans weren't happening to check Reddit at that time. I was just curious about that.
It does, if you're logged into the dashboard version of it, it will at the top say, hey, there's been some really any like real major shifts in things that are going on. It will give you that alert. We also have API access to the, so again, once we've aggregated the information, you can look at it in the dashboard view, but also if you're building other tools that you're like, I'd really just love to have this information infused to your point or to somebody else's point about with other sources, and we're building our own internal tools. There's a way to just bypass the dashboard and have this information loaded in directly as well.
You do synthetic audience surveys too? Like, do you build personas out of people who are responding, and then role play and see what may come out of it?
It does do. We have done some work in sort of developing. Brands usually have their own personas, so they're usually not looking for that. But we have asked, like, hey, build personas out of this, and again, through the Ask Clamor, you can prompt whatever questions that you want. It doesn't save those audiences and it just sort of is looking at it from a diagnostics perspective and saying, hey, we would group these conversations into these ways. You can then start to push on that and prompt like you would any LLM and say, hey, what about this and what about that? And it can adjust, or you can tell it, these are our brand personas based on this, like what percentage fall into this, and what is their sentiment and how are they feeling, and start to do some then predictive how might they respond to the following. So it's very, I don't know, open source is the right word, but it provides some level of information and prompts that you can just stay within, but then the goal is that you are now starting to interact with this data, and sometimes it can be, again, extremely insightful, and sometimes it's no-brainer, and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we don't want to use this information for, these particular decisions when you need hard quant, this is probably not it. But when you're like, there's a lot of grayness in marketing and a lot of like, I just need signals, I just need, something to move from, this is that great proxy for that.
But indeed, you could keep having a conversation and go deeper with the LLM if you wanted to, as opposed to like, a static dashboard that's the percentage and that's it.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay.
And then it saves, everybody's in there, so you can kind of see what everybody else is asking. And so again, it's supposed to be sort of an expansive tool, like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting that somebody was asking, that there's interest in this. And so it hopefully creates more conversation and more dialogue inside the organization.
And so is it just like one license then, to your point? Like how
we sell it we call it a workspace. And so there's, I'm sure there is a cap that would be quite high, but pretty, it's pretty open in terms of being able to invite in people within your organization and without, and you'd need sort of an administrator to say, here we agree. They could take a look at the list of who all has been invited and that you agree that all those people should be in there, but there's no additional cost for having 4 people in there versus 20.
So Tiffany, are there other areas that you're exploring right now with like where you're considering using AI, where maybe you've like test things that aren't quite there yet? Like what else is on your radar for like the rest of the year, next 6 months or so?
Yeah, we are. We started with it focusing completely on just your own social data. So you had to log in all of your channels in there, at least one, but as many as you wanted. We've now found that this is a bit of a barrier for organizations, like even large organizations, like nobody knows their social credentials or where to find them. And so I'm like, this is surprising, but not. Like things that are day to day like are the same at an enterprise level. And so we've now are working on separating that out so that you can log in and do some level of analysis just based on the data scraping that services that we've integrated, so that you can get started and see if there's value and see if there's insights there, and then start to, as you get access or find access to it, it works much faster and again gets deeper insights the more kind of first party data that you are able to log into it. So that's our focus at the moment. We do feel like this, agent that is, evaluating things and thinking like a marketer and thinking like a strategist has value beyond just the social data. To your point, there's other data sources that we could start to layer in that's on the roadmap that whether it's even just the kind of the cozy web, as it's called, the Discords and the Reddits and all of that, whether we start to pull that in, or even just using this agent in different ways. We've talked about, working closer with influencers and them understanding their audiences and, building a tool that might just be for influencer. Right now, the tool is built for brands to just understand their information and even the data that their own data plus what influencers and other partners that they're working with, what these conversations are, and that there's value in that. But yeah, I think going after influencer market could be interesting and is on our roadmap. So yeah, lots of roadmap ideas. Not enough time in the year to get all of those done, but we do still consider ourselves in beta, even though it's been, most of the year, because we're still learning and trying to figure out, like, we see a need for this, but, what else is needed? So, we will, as we roll out this new version in the next couple of weeks, kind of reach back out to this audience and allow you to sort of beta test this new version for free and, give us your thoughts and tell us, what you like about it and what you don't, and help fuel the roadmap and ideation.
Okay. Well, hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm sitting up a little straighter in my chair now because this is the third discussion I've had in 2 weeks about culture.
Mm.
And suddenly everyone's talking about, why it matters. And so I was going to ask you if you could, open up the drawbridge and let us poke around. But if we're going to be able to test it for free, I can't wait, because suddenly it's like the middle of the bell curve just came up and everyone's like, culture, culture, culture. I was in one pitch yesterday. I won't name the company. And, there was some platitudes and yeah, it's important, but your, tone shifts, language patterns, emerging frictions, which is very important, cultural context. There were 3 or 4 different verticals represented on this call. And I think yours is the most fluid in terms of a waterfall of outcomes that are capable. At least you articulated it better than anyone on this call yesterday. So I'm paying attention, gonna look into whatever you're willing to share.
Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, we could share it today, but I think that, again, this having to use the social channels, logins, I feel like is a learning for us, that it is, super rich, but also a barrier. And so I think we're wanting to open this up to say, hey, this is coming within the next couple weeks. So if we can, because everything's built, we just kind of have to just separate it out a little bit, so that you can log in and just say, hey, like, just start interacting, and we can scrape a certain amount of information. But yeah, to your point, you can get a certain amount of information for LLMs. LLMs are built to make things acceptable answers to the general public. So like it's, somewhat accurate, but interesting provocations for a brand to action. Like, no, it's too generic for any of that. I think once you layer in the provocations of people who are, this sentient analysis that is basically, human thoughts of like how marketers look at the world, plus your brand information, that's where it becomes That's where I think the cultural piece, like how does my brand sit in culture? These other tools are, I've looked at it and it's like, oh, top influencers or it's like what's going on in the world. But it's like, well, that's not relevant to my brand. Like I need that brand relevance piece connected to the culture. And so again, this is where we think this is a great proxy for that. If it's too general about just culture in general, it's not useful, or too generic in a response, it's not useful. So again, we're trying to figure out how to make it as accessible as possible, but still generate those provocations and those insights that are interesting and also actionable. So it's like interesting, but it's not actionable. Then like, nah, it's no good. So constantly trying to refine it and make it better.
What I like about it, without going into specifics, I do some financial advisory and specifically articulating strategy narratives for buy side and sell side advisories, mostly M&A. And what I like about this is if you're going to buy a company, you're also going to buy culture, and you can put a value on this. What are you missing? And if you integrate the company, what do you bring in to the DNA? And the bigger company usually squashes the little company. So if you can make a narrative as to the value add of the cultural, not only engagement, but enrichment, I think that's another angle of possibly another industry vertical, because it is marketing, it's still storytelling, but it's a storytelling around strategy, not about audience.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the C-suite, if you're not in marketing, you're thinking, wow, what is that? What's the message we have here? I don't care. What are we bringing into the company that we're lacking that can accentuate, our market share, ROI, penetration? It's just a whole lot of things that got me thinking. Again, this is the third time in 2 weeks, and this is, by far the most prefrontal cortex engagement I've had.
Well, it is funny that you say that because we were having it was at a CMO roundtable, and so it was lots of different brands discussing, and a woman who was a CMO at McCormick's was there, so seasonings and all of and they were like, our traditional brand isn't allowed to do anything like take chances. Like we are kind of the champion, and like it's got to kind of stay. But if we bring in a new sauce or some new product, that's where they get to experiment and play. And so it's not like these internal organizations, to your point about bringing something new in, what is its role, and is its role just to like add revenue, or is it that the place where you can test things, and then are there things that you can build a test and learn plan that you can then say, these are the things that are just testing for this brand, these are things that are specific that could go across the whole portfolio and learn from and lift all boats. And so I think you could definitely use this tool. Again, it's sort of the like, it doesn't tell you what to do. It sort of assumes you have a certain level of curiosity or interest or, test and learn philosophy. Sky's the limit with the tool. So, we've seen investors come in and just use it like they use Sprinkler, and they're like, we're not getting a lot of value out of it. And I'm like, okay, because you're trying to make it Sprinkler. And so, that's fine. This is supposed to be meant to, again, be expansive, be new thinking based on owned data, but you have to bring the new thinking. So it's there to help enable that, but it's not going to do it for you.
I'm sure your platform can show me some blind spots as well. Sorry, Karen, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's okay. I just wanted to say the superpower of the AI era is your ability to ask questions, your curiosity. The data is there. But what you ask and what you're looking at, that's the value that you bring into the table.
It's the interrogation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love that you're asking like, what's working, what's not, what could I do better? Where am I blind? I'm like, you can just ask it those conversational things, and it will tell you, which will then again create more thoughts.
Well, this is always the challenge here, because a lot of the best ideas come up in the last 5-10 minutes, and but these are always meant to be conversation starters, and Tiffany, we appreciate you and your team coming today and starting a lot of really thought-provoking conversations and inspiring us. And yeah, a lot of folks here will be excited to kick the tires and get a sense of how this all works. So happy to share things with the community. You're already in there, so that helps. Thanks, Ashley, as well, for making all this possible. And just appreciate all the great questions today. It's always fun to get back and listen to what everyone else is excited about. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Everyone's welcome again to test.aimarketersguild.org. And yeah, appreciate all of this. So thank you. And Tiffany, hope you keep coming back and sharing more about what you and the Consiglieri team are working on there.
Love it. Love that this is a like-minded group of people. I feel like in order to change things, like Consiglieri isn't going to do it all. Like we need everybody sort of like thinking these same things and doing it. So so love to have found this group.
Great. Glad you're here. Thanks, everyone.